Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked out at the fleet before him. 12,000 ships floated in the darkness of space. They came from 17 different alien races, all united under the Vorthon Empire. This was the largest military force anyone had ever seen in the galaxy. The ships were beautiful and deadly. Some looked like giant crystals that caught the light from distant stars. Others were smooth and curved like sea creatures from forgotten worlds. The Vorthon ships themselves were dark and angular, built for war and conquest. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Zethkar was proud of what he had built. For 300 years, the Vorthon Empire had grown stronger. They had conquered world after world, bringing order to the chaos of the galaxy. Now they faced their greatest challenge yet. "Admiral," said Commander Vexitala as she approached. Her scales were a deep blue color that showed her nervousness. "The scouts have returned from the target zone. The reports are troubling." Zethkar turned his 4 eyes toward his intelligence officer. "Explain." Vextala activated a holographic display that showed a small section of the galaxy. It was called the Orion Arm, and most civilized races thought it was worthless. The stars were spread far apart, and the planets were mostly water and rock. But recent scans had shown something unexpected. "We found advanced technology throughout this region," Vextala said. "Ships that move faster than they should, communication networks that span multiple star systems, and most disturbing of all, the beings that live there match the old stories." Zethkar felt a chill run down his spine. Every species in the galaxy knew the ancient tales. They spoke of bipedal creatures called humans who could survive in places that would kill most other beings. The stories said they never gave up, even when facing impossible odds. They could adapt to any situation and turn their enemies' strengths against them. But these were just myths, stories told to young ones to teach them about courage and determination. No real species could be that dangerous. "Show me the evidence," Zethkar demanded. The hologram changed to show intercepted communications. The language was strange, but the translation software worked well enough. The beings called themselves humans, just like in the old stories. They had colonies on dozens of worlds and seemed to be expanding rapidly. "They have been watching us," Vextala continued. "Their scout ships have been seen near our borders. They know we are coming." Zethkar studied the data carefully. The human ships were smaller than Vorthon vessels, but they moved in ways that suggested advanced technology. Their weapons seemed primitive, but the energy readings were higher than expected. "How many of them are there?" he asked. Intelligence estimates place their total population at around 50 billion spread across 200 worlds. Their military appears to number in the millions, but their technology level is difficult to assess. 50 billion was a large number, but not compared to the Vorthon Empire's trillion citizens. And millions of soldiers were nothing against the Empire's 100 million warriors. The numbers were clearly in their favor. "Admiral," Vextala said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider this campaign. The old stories are just stories," Zethkar interrupted. "Myths created by defeated enemies to explain their failures. We have conquered 1,000 worlds and faced every type of warrior the galaxy has to offer. These humans cannot be any different." But even as he spoke, Zethkar felt doubt creeping into his mind. The ancient warnings had been remarkably consistent across different species and time periods. They all described humans in the same way: relentless, adaptable, and impossible to truly defeat. Far away from the Vorthon fleet on a world called New Denver, Captain Jake Martinez was having a very different conversation. He stood in the command center of an orbital defense station, looking down at the peaceful farms and cities below. Green fields stretched to the horizon, and he could see children playing in the town squares. "Captain," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, "we just received a priority message from Earth Command." Jake took the datapad and read the brief message. His face went pale. The research station at Alpha Centauri B had been destroyed. No survivors. All human colonies were ordered to prepare for possible invasion. "How bad is it?" Amy asked, seeing his expression. Bad, Jake replied. Someone just wiped out an entire research facility, turned it into space dust. Command thinks it might be the beginning of a larger attack. Jake looked out at the colony. Again. New Denver was home to 2 million people. Farmers, teachers, children, elderly people who had come here to enjoy their retirement years. They had no idea that death might be coming from the stars. "What are our defenses?" he asked his tactical officer. 6 patrol corvettes and the orbital platforms, came the reply. "We also have about 20 civilian ships that could be armed, if needed. Not much against a real military force." Jake nodded grimly. New Denver was an agricultural world, not a military base. It had been chosen precisely because it was peaceful and safe, now that safety might be an illusion. On Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the city of Geneva, Fleet Admiral Lisa Thompson was coordinating humanity's response to the crisis. The war room was filled with officers studying star charts and intelligence reports. Red lights blinked on displays as more bad news arrived. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis, "we have confirmation of attacks on 3 outer colonies. The pattern suggests a coordinated assault by a large fleet." Lisa studied the tactical display. The attacks were happening along the edge of human space, moving inward toward the more populated systems. Someone was systematically destroying human colonies, testing their defenses. "How long until our main battle fleets can respond?" she asked. "The nearest fleet is 6 weeks away from the conflict zone," Paul replied. "The outer colonies are on their own." Lisa closed her eyes for a moment. She had spent her entire career preparing for this day. First contact with hostile aliens had always been a possibility, but she had hoped it would never happen. Now hundreds of millions of human lives hung in the balance. "Send word to all colonial governors," she ordered. "Full military alert. Every ship that can fight should be armed and ready, and send a message to the diplomatic corps. If these aliens want to talk, we need to know what they want." But deep down, Lisa suspected that talking would not be enough. The pattern of attack suggested an enemy that was not interested in negotiation. They wanted humanity destroyed, and they had the power to do it. The storm was gathering, and humanity was about to face its greatest test. The Vorthan fleet approached New Denver like a storm cloud blotting out the stars. Admiral Zethkar watched the peaceful world grow larger on his display screens and felt satisfied. This would be another easy victory, just like the 12 colonies they had already destroyed. Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of his command station and counted the enemy ships as they came out of hyperspace. 200 vessels, each one larger than anything in his small defense fleet. His own force consisted of 6 patrol corvettes and a handful of civilian ships that had been quickly fitted with weapons. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, "they are trying to communicate with us." Jake nodded. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and showed an alien face unlike anything Jake had ever seen. 4 golden eyes stared at him from a reptilian head covered in dark scales. When the creature spoke, its voice was deep and filled with authority. "I am Admiral Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire," the alien said. "You will surrender your world immediately or face complete destruction. You have 1 minute to decide." Jake looked at the alien commander and felt his anger rising. This creature had already murdered millions of innocent people on other colonies. Now it was threatening his home, his people, his family. "This is Captain Jake Martinez of the New Denver Defense Force," he replied calmly. "You are not welcome. Here, leave now, or we will destroy you." Zethkar's 4 eyes widened in surprise. This small human fleet was threatening him? They were outnumbered 50 to 1. No sane military commander would even consider fighting against such odds. "You dare threaten the Vorthan Empire?" Zethkar snarled. "Your ships are toys compared to our warships. Your weapons cannot even scratch our armor." Jake smiled grimly. "Then you have nothing to worry about." The transmission ended and Jake turned to his crew. "All ships, this is Martinez. We are about to face an enemy that thinks we are weak. They think humans are cowards who will run at the first sign of trouble. Let us show them how wrong they are." The battle began when Jake's corvette, the Alamo, fired the first shot. A stream of railgun rounds struck the lead Vorthan cruiser, punching through its shields and armor like they were made of paper. The alien ship exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Admiral Zethkar stared in shock. That should have been impossible. His ships had the best shields and armor in the galaxy. How had primitive human weapons penetrated them so easily? All ships, attack, he ordered. Destroy them all. What followed was unlike any battle the Vorthons had ever experienced. The human ships moved in ways that seemed to defy physics, using the gravity of the planet and its moons to change direction without warning. They fought with a coordination that suggested they could read each other's minds. Jake's corvette danced between the larger Vorthon ships, firing constantly. Every shot found its target, and every target died. The humans seemed to know exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. How are they doing this? Zethkar demanded of his tactical officer. Unknown, sir. They appear to be targeting our weak points with impossible accuracy, and their ships are more maneuverable than our sensors indicated. The Alamo destroyed 3 more Vorthon cruisers before taking a direct hit from a battleship's main guns. Jake felt the ship shudder around him as systems failed and fires broke out on multiple decks. "Captain, we have lost main power," Amy reported. "Life support is failing. We need to evacuate." Jake looked at his tactical display. The civilian evacuation ships were almost clear of the planet's gravity well, but they needed more time. The Vorthon fleet was already moving to intercept them. "Negative," Jake said. "We stay and fight, all power to weapons. If we are going to die, we take as many of them with us as possible." The crew of the Alamo did not argue. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing they might not survive. They were soldiers, and soldiers did their duty no matter the cost. For the next 10 minutes, the Alamo fought alone against dozens of enemy ships. Jake used every trick he had learned in 20 years of military service. He rammed smaller vessels, used his ship's reactor as a bomb, and fired his weapons until the barrels melted. In those 10 minutes, the Alamo destroyed 7 more enemy cruisers and damaged twice that number. But the ship was dying, and Jake knew it. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "It has been an honor serving with you. Remember New Denver. Make them pay for every inch." The Alamo's reactor exploded, taking 2 more Vorthon ships with it. "Admiral." Zethkar watched the human ship die and felt a chill run through his body. One small corvette had destroyed 9 of his cruisers and damaged dozens more. The human captain had fought to the very end, never once asking for mercy or trying to surrender. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the human evacuation fleet has escaped into hyperspace." Zethkar looked at the tactical display. His fleet had won, but the victory felt hollow. He had started the battle with 200 ships. Now he had only 153. Almost 50 vessels had been destroyed or damaged by a defense force that should have been swept aside in minutes. "How long did the battle last?" he asked. 6 hours and 14 minutes, sir." 6 hours. What should have been a 30-minute conquest had taken most of a day, and the humans had saved most of their civilians while inflicting terrible casualties on the Vorthon fleet. On the planet below, the few remaining human soldiers were still fighting. They had retreated to the mountains and were using guerrilla tactics to harass the Vorthon occupation forces. Even in defeat, they refused to surrender. "Sir," Commander Vextala approached carefully. "The other fleet commanders are requesting additional reinforcements for future operations. The human resistance was unexpected." Zethkar nodded slowly. The myths were beginning to seem less like stories and more like warnings, but he had come too far to turn back now. The Vorthon Empire had never retreated from any enemy, and he would not be the first admiral to show weakness. "Send word to High Command," he ordered. "Request additional battle groups, and tell them that the humans are not what we expected." As his fleet moved toward the next target, Zethkar could not stop thinking about Captain Martinez and his last transmission. The human had known he was going to die, but he had fought anyway. He had given his life to save civilians he would never meet. What kind of species produced warriors like that? And what would happen when they stopped running and started fighting back? The Admiral did not want to find out, but he suspected he would learn the answer very soon. Admiral Zethkar stared at the after-action reports from his latest victories and felt his confidence cracking like ice in spring. 3 more human colonies had fallen to his fleet, but each battle had been harder than the last. The humans were learning from every encounter, adapting their tactics with frightening speed. At the colony of New Sparta, the humans had used asteroid fields as cover, turning space rocks into weapons that destroyed Vorthon ships. At New Tokyo, they had somehow hacked into Vorthon communication systems, causing 3 battleships to fire on their own allies. At New Berlin, the human defenders had actually boarded Vorthon vessels, fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors until they could detonate the ships from within. "Commander Vextala," Zethkar called to his intelligence officer, "what is the status of our losses?" Vextala approached with visible reluctance. "Admiral, we have lost over 400 ships in the past month. Our casualty rates are climbing. With each engagement, the crew morale reports are also concerning." Zethkar's 4 eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The troops are beginning to believe the old stories about humans. They say that fighting these creatures brings bad luck. Some are requesting transfers to other sectors." The Admiral felt anger rising in his chest. His soldiers were warriors who had conquered dozens of species without fear. Now they were becoming superstitious because of a few difficult battles. "The humans are just another enemy," he said firmly. "They bleed and die like any other species. We will continue the campaign as planned." But privately, Zethkar was beginning to have doubts. The human tactics made no sense according to standard military doctrine. They seemed to value the lives of civilians over strategic advantage. They would sacrifice valuable ships to save a single transport full of refugees. They fought with an intensity that bordered on madness. The opportunity for revenge came when Commander Vextala intercepted human communications about a supply convoy heading toward the besieged colony of New Olympia. Long-range scans showed 12 cargo ships carrying vital supplies and military personnel. "Admiral," Vextala reported, "this convoy represents a chance to cripple human resistance in this sector. If we can destroy their supplies, the colonies will fall much easier." Zethkar studied the tactical data. The convoy appeared to be lightly defended with only a small escort force. Capturing or destroying it would be simple. "Deploy Hunting Group 7, he ordered. 60 ships should be more than enough to handle a few cargo vessels. The Hunting Group consisted of some of his best ships and most experienced crews. They jumped to hyperspace with confidence, expecting an easy victory over helpless civilian transports. What they found instead was Colonel Ryan Blake and his Marines. Blake had been expecting this attack. Human intelligence had deliberately leaked the convoy's route, knowing that the Vorthons would try to intercept it. What appeared to be defenseless cargo ships were actually heavily modified assault vessels packed with weapons and soldiers. "All units, this is Blake." The colonel's voice rang out over the Marine communication network. "The aliens think they are hunting sheep. Time to show them they found wolves instead." The trap was sprung with devastating precision. The cargo ships suddenly opened like deadly flowers, revealing hidden weapons bays filled with missiles and railguns. Fighter squadrons poured out of concealed launch bays, swarming the surprised Vorthon ships. Colonel Blake's flagship, disguised as a simple freighter, fired a spread of torpedoes that destroyed 3 Vorthon cruisers in the first volley. His Marines had studied captured alien technology for months, learning the weak points of every ship design. "Target their shield generators first," Blake ordered. "Then hit their engines. Leave them alive long enough to know they have been beaten." The Vorthon hunting group found themselves surrounded and outgunned by an enemy they had underestimated. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, each vessel covering its neighbors while striking at precise targets. Captain Thekvor, commanding the Vorthon force, tried to organize a counterattack. "All ships, form defensive formation, concentrate, fire on the largest human vessel." But the humans had anticipated this tactic. As the Vorthon ships closed together, Blake's forces revealed another surprise. Hidden among the cargo containers were mine layers that had been quietly dropping explosive devices throughout the battle zone. The Vorthon formation flew directly into a minefield. Ships exploded one after another as they triggered the hidden weapons. Those that survived the mines found themselves facing close-range attacks from human fighters that seemed to appear from nowhere. "This is impossible," Captain Thekvor muttered as his ship shuddered under enemy fire. "Intelligence said these were cargo vessels." His tactical officer looked up from his console with fear in his eyes. "Sir, I am detecting energy signatures, consistent with modified warships. These are not cargo vessels at all." The battle lasted only 40 minutes, but it was 40 minutes of pure terror for the Vorthon crews. The humans fought with a precision and ferocity that shocked even experienced warriors. They seemed to anticipate every move, counter every tactic, and exploit every weakness. When it was over, only 7 of the 60 Vorthon ships escaped to hyperspace. The rest were either destroyed or so badly damaged that they could barely maintain life support. The human convoy reached New Olympia intact, bringing not just supplies but proof that humans could turn apparent weakness into devastating strength. "Colonel," Blake sent a message that was picked up by every human colony in the sector. "This is just the beginning. We are done running. Now we hunt." Admiral Zethkar received the battle report in stunned silence. 60 ships destroyed by what should have been a defenseless convoy. His best hunting group wiped out in less than an hour. The impossible had become routine when fighting humans. "Sir," Commander Vextala said quietly, "perhaps we should request additional reinforcements from High Command. The humans are proving more difficult than anticipated." Zethkar looked at the tactical displays showing human colonies throughout the sector. Red indicators marked worlds that were supposed to be conquered and pacified. Instead, they showed signs of increasing resistance and military buildup. "Send the request," he said finally, "and tell High Command that we may have underestimated our enemy." But even as he gave the order, Zethkar wondered if reinforcements would be enough. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. They treated every defeat as a lesson, every loss as motivation for revenge. They seemed to grow stronger with each battle, learning and adapting at an impossible rate. The myths spoke of humans as unstoppable warriors who never surrendered. Zethkar was beginning to fear that the myths had understated the problem. The humans were not just unstoppable, they were teaching themselves to become something far more dangerous. They were becoming hunters themselves. Fleet Admiral Lisa Thompson stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching as the holographic display showed the galaxy in real time. Red indicators that had marked conquered human worlds were slowly changing to blue as her fleets fought back. The tide was turning, but not in the way anyone had expected. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis approached with the latest intelligence reports. "We are seeing something remarkable. Colonies that were supposedly destroyed are showing signs of organized resistance. Underground networks, hidden bases, survivor groups that have somehow remained operational despite orbital bombardment." Lisa nodded as she studied the data. The Vorthons had made a critical mistake when they assumed that destroying cities and military bases meant destroying human resistance. They had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to accept defeat. "What is the status of our counteroffensive?" she asked. "Admiral Susan Clark's battle group has successfully retaken the New Texas system. Admiral Richard Stone's fleet is moving toward the Vorthon staging area at Kepler 442. But the real surprise is coming from the outer rim colonies." The display shifted to show the frontier regions where the first attacks had occurred. Instead of empty conquered systems, the Vorthons were facing constant harassment from human survivors who had learned to fight back using captured alien technology. On New Denver, the world where Captain Jake Martinez had made his last stand, a resistance movement led by former police chief Maria Santos had been studying Vorthon technology for months. They had learned to turn the aliens' own weapons against them, sabotaging supply lines and communication networks with devastating effectiveness. "The Vorthons are reporting massive supply problems throughout their occupied territories," Paul continued. "Their rear areas are no longer secure. Human resistance fighters are using guerrilla tactics that their military doctrine has no answer for." Maria Santos crouched in the ruins of what had once been New Denver's capital city, watching a Vorthon patrol through her scope. The aliens moved in perfect formation, their weapons ready, but they could not see the trap that waited for them. "Team 2, are you in position?" she whispered into her communicator. "Confirmed," came the reply from Lieutenant Ben Foster, Amy's brother, who had survived the orbital bombardment by hiding in the underground tunnels. "Charges are set on the main supply depot." Team 3? Ready? Reported Dr. Nancy Williams, a former colony administrator who had become an expert in Vorthan computer systems. I have access to their communication network. On your mark, I can shut down their entire grid. Maria smiled grimly. The Vorthans thought they had conquered New Denver, but they had only captured its surface. The real colony lived on in the hearts and minds of its people, and those people had learned to fight back. Execute, she ordered. The attack was swift and brutal. Explosions tore through the Vorthan supply depot while their communication systems went dark. The patrol that Maria had been watching found themselves surrounded by humans who emerged from the ruins like ghosts, wielding captured, alien weapons with deadly precision. In less than 10 minutes, the Vorthan garrison was destroyed. The survivors fled into space, carrying word that New Denver was still defended by its original inhabitants. Similar attacks were happening throughout the occupied territories. On New Berlin, survivors had learned to hack Vorthan ship computers, causing vessels to crash into their own bases. On New Sparta, resistance fighters had captured an entire armory and were now attacking Vorthan positions with their own weapons. But the greatest shock came when Admiral Zethkar received an urgent transmission from his home fleet. The fortress world of Vorth Minor, deep in Vorthan space, was under attack by a human task force that had somehow penetrated their defensive networks. Impossible, Zethkar snarled as he watched his empire's industrial capacity being systematically dismantled. How did they get past our sensor grids? The answer came from his intelligence chief, who had finally managed to decrypt human military communications. Sir, they did not come through our space. They went around it through the galactic rim using navigation routes we considered impossible to travel. Admiral Richard Stone commanded the human fleet that was currently destroying Vorthan shipyards and manufacturing centers. His ships had spent weeks traveling through the empty space between galaxies, guided by stellar cartographers who had found paths through regions that most species considered impassable. Target the orbital construction platforms, Stone ordered, as his fleet emerged from hyperspace above another Vorthan industrial world. Leave the civilian population alone, but destroy everything that can build warships. Stone's fleet moved with surgical precision, taking out military targets while carefully avoiding civilian areas. This was not a war of extermination like the Vorthans had launched against humanity. This was a strategic campaign designed to cripple the enemy's ability to fight while showing that humans could be merciful to those who did not threaten them. The psychological effect was devastating. Vorthan civilian populations began to question their government's propaganda about savage, mindless humans. If these creatures were truly monsters, why were they taking such care to avoid civilian casualties? Admiral, Stone's communications officer reported, "We are receiving surrender offers from 3 more Vorthan colonies. They want to negotiate terms." Stone smiled. "Accept their surrender, but make it clear that any world that attacks human civilians will face complete destruction. We are not here to conquer their empire. We are here to stop their war against us." Back in the command center on Earth, Admiral Lisa Thompson was coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Fleets were moving throughout the galaxy, striking at Vorthan positions while avoiding civilian targets. The goal was not conquest but liberation, freeing the dozens of species that had suffered under Vorthan rule. "Admiral," Paul Davis reported, "we are receiving communication requests from 17 different alien species. They want to discuss alliance agreements against the Vorthan Empire." Lisa studied the list of species names. Some she recognized from intelligence reports as Vorthan client states. Others were completely unknown. All of them had apparently decided that humanity represented a better future than continued Vorthan dominance. "Set up diplomatic meetings with all of them," she ordered, "but make it clear that any alliance must include respect for civilian populations and peaceful coexistence. We are not interested in replacing one empire with another." The first diplomatic meeting was with Ambassador Thekmore of the Corvan Republic. The reptilian being had traveled across the galaxy to meet with human representatives, carrying an offer that would change the course of the war. "My people have suffered under Vorthan rule for 3 centuries, Thekmore explained through a translation device. "We have detailed intelligence on their military structure, their defensive positions, and their command protocols. We offer this information freely in exchange for your promise to liberate our worlds. Lisa studied the data that the Corvan ambassador provided. It included complete schematics of Vorthon ships, tactical doctrines, and most importantly, the location of their high command. "Why should we trust you?" she asked. Deckmore's scaled face showed something that might have been a smile. "Because your species has shown something that we have not seen in centuries: honor in warfare. You could have destroyed our worlds as easily as Vorthon worlds, but you chose to spare civilians. That tells us more about your character than any words could." As alliance agreements were signed and new fleets joined the human cause, Admiral Zethkar found his empire crumbling from within. Rebellions were breaking out on dozens of worlds. His supply lines were under constant attack. His own officers were beginning to question the wisdom of continuing a war against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every battle. The humans were not just winning, they were teaching the galaxy a new way to fight. A way that combined military strength with moral authority, that struck at enemies while protecting innocents, that turned conquest into liberation. The age of Vorthon dominance was ending, and a new era was about to begin. The war room beneath Geneva had become the heart of humanity's first interstellar military campaign. Admiral Lisa Thompson watched as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Vorthon fleets were retreating on all fronts. Alien slave worlds were declaring independence, and dozens of species were requesting human assistance against their former oppressors. The Vorthon Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had thought possible, but Admiral Zethkar still commanded a dangerous force. His remaining ships had withdrawn to the fortress world of Vorth Prime, where he was preparing to make his final stand. Intelligence estimates he has 8,000 ships remaining, Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis reported. Our combined fleet numbers about 4,000. Even with our allies, the odds are still against us. Lisa studied the tactical display showing the Vorth system. The planet was surrounded by massive defensive platforms and minefields. Getting close enough to attack would cost thousands of ships and millions of lives. "What about our new allies?" she asked. The past months had brought unexpected friends. The insectoid Chithi offered their swarming fighter tactics. The aquatic hydrants provided advanced stealth technology. The crystalline Zelix shared their knowledge of energy weapons. Most importantly, the Corvan Republic had given them detailed plans of Vorthon defenses. Ambassador Thekmore had become a regular visitor to the human command center. The reptilian diplomat had lost his entire family to Vorthon brutality and wanted to see their empire destroyed completely. "My people have waited 300 years for this moment," he had told Lisa during their first meeting. "The Vorthons believe themselves to be the masters of the galaxy, but they have never faced anything like your species. You fight not just with weapons but with hope. That is something they cannot understand or defeat." The final battle began when Admiral Susan Clark's fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vorth system. Her ships moved in perfect formation, ready to face whatever the Vorthons could throw at them. Admiral Zethkar watched the human fleet approach and felt a mixture of fear and respect. These creatures had destroyed his empire in less than a year, turning his greatest victory into his ultimate defeat. Now they had come to finish what he had started. "All ships, prepare for battle," he ordered. "Today we show the galaxy that the Vorthon Empire does not die easily." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of ships from dozens of species clashed in the darkness of space, their weapons lighting up the void like a deadly fireworks. Display Admiral Susan Clark commanded the main human battle line, her ships advancing steadily through the Vorthon defenses. Beside her flew the alien allies who had joined humanity's cause, each contributing their unique strengths to the combined assault. But the decisive blow came from an unexpected source. Maria Santos, the resistance leader from New Denver, had spent months infiltrating Vorthon computer networks. She had learned their systems better than the aliens themselves, finding weaknesses that even their own engineers did not know existed. "Admiral," Maria's voice crackled over the communication system from her position aboard a stealth ship, "I have access to their defense grid. On your signal I can shut down their orbital platforms and open a corridor to the planet." Lisa Thompson watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. Human and alien ships were dying by the hundreds as they fought through the Vorthon defenses, but they were winning, slowly pushing back an enemy that had once seemed invincible. "Do it," she ordered. Maria's virus spread through the Vorthon computer network like wildfire, shutting down weapons platforms and defensive systems throughout the system. Suddenly, the impregnable fortress became vulnerable. "This is for Captain Martinez and everyone else you murdered," Maria transmitted on open channels as Vorthon ships began colliding with their own defensive platforms. Admiral Richard Stone's battle group punched through the gap in the defenses, heading straight for Vorth Prime. But instead of bombarding the planet, his ships took up defensive positions around it. "Admiral Zethkar," Stone transmitted to the Vorthon flagship, "this is Admiral Stone of the human fleet. Your defenses are down, your fleet is defeated, and your empire is finished. Surrender now, and we will show mercy to your people." On the bridge of his dying flagship, Admiral Zethkar looked at the human fleet surrounding his world. His own ships were burning hulks, his empire was in ruins, and his people were defenseless. But somehow, he felt a strange sense of relief. "I understand now," he said as he opened a communication channel to Admiral Thompson on Earth. "The myths were not warnings about what you could do. They were warnings about what you would become if we pushed you too far." Lisa Thompson looked at the alien commander who had started this war with such confidence. She could see the defeat in his 4 eyes, but also something else. A grudging respect for the species he had tried to destroy. "Admiral Zethkar," she said formally, "I offer you the same terms we have offered every Vorthan world. Complete surrender, the release of all slave populations, and cooperation in establishing a new galactic government based on equality and justice. In return, we guarantee the safety of your people and their right to exist as a free species." Zethkar closed his eyes and thought about the long war that had brought them to this moment. His empire had ruled through fear and conquest for centuries, believing that strength alone was enough to maintain order. But the humans had shown him a different way, one that combined military power with moral authority. "We surrender," he said quietly. The announcement was broadcast throughout the galaxy, carried by communication networks that spanned hundreds of worlds. The Vorthan Empire, which had dominated galactic politics for 3 centuries, was finished. In its place would rise something new, a confederation of free worlds working together for mutual benefit. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Millions of humans had died in the war, entire colonies had been destroyed, and the galaxy would never be the same. As Admiral Thompson watched the surrender ceremonies, she reflected on the price of proving that myths could become reality. The ancient stories had spoken of humans as impossible to defeat, but they had failed to mention the most important truth. Defeating humans was not the real nightmare. It was making them angry enough to fight back. Colonel Ryan Blake, now commanding the occupation forces on Vorth Prime, received reports from across the former empire. Slave species were declaring independence, democratic governments were forming on dozens of worlds, and trade networks were being established based on cooperation rather than conquest. "Admiral," he reported to Lisa Thompson, "the transition is going better than expected. Most of the former client species are eager to work with us. They seem genuinely grateful for their freedom." Lisa nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Remember, Ryan, we did not fight this war to become conquerors ourselves. Our goal is to establish a lasting peace where all species can coexist safely." "Understood, Admiral. But I have to ask, what happens now? We have the most powerful military in the galaxy. Some of our own people are starting to suggest that we should use that power to impose our will on other species." Lisa looked out at the stars through the viewport of her command ship. Humanity had proven itself capable of winning wars. But now came the harder test, proving that they could win the peace. "We go home," she said simply. "We rebuild our colonies, honor our dead, and show the galaxy that humans can be trusted with power. The myths spoke of our strength in war. Now we must create new myths about our wisdom in peace." As the human fleets began their long journey home, carrying with them the knowledge that they had forever changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter. The age of empire was ending, and the age of cooperation was about to begin. The humans had learned that they were not alone in the universe, and the universe had learned that humans were far more than the myths had ever suggested. They were the species that would reshape the galaxy not through conquest, but through the simple revolutionary idea that all intelligent life deserved freedom and dignity. The void had brought forth an armada, but from that darkness had emerged something far more powerful than any fleet, hope for a better future among the stars.